It's well known among fans that Game Freak often don't get enough development time for their Pokemon games. The teraleak made this even more evident, with all of the scrapped concepts and ideas revealed that never made it into the final products. By now you've probably seen the leaked South Kalos map, or the early open world prototype for Generation 5. However, today I want to shine a light on Sun and Moon. Despite not being the center of attention during the leak era, these games arguably had the most significant amount of scrapped content. So let's dive straight in and take a look at one of the most exciting features that was cut, the gym building quest. So remember how you became Alola's first Pokemon League champion? Well, originally, Game Freak had planned for an extensive post-game storyline right after this victory. Pretty much you would be tasked with recruiting characters across the Alola region to serve as gym leaders for your newly formed Pokemon League. Every gym location would have a gym advisor stationed outside, and you could talk to them to decide what type of gym it would be. You'd also be given a list of characters to choose from as potential gym leaders, and most major characters in the game were eligible, except for these characters for unknown reasons. You could also assign gym badges to these leaders, and while it's not specified if badge customization was a feature, the mention of assigning badges suggests that there may have been some sort of design control involved. Once all 8 gym leaders were recruited, you'd be able to battle each of them, culminating in a special event with a professor. Unfortunately, the details of this event remain unclear, and since the professor was the former champion, and you defeated him at the end of Sun and Moon, it's unlikely this event would have been a rematch. Another scrapped feature was called gym inspections. This would have allowed you to rematch the gym leaders multiple times, with each visit rewarding different prizes. On your first visit, you'd receive the gym badge. The second visit would grant a competitive ready Pokemon of the leader's ace Pokemon, and on the third visit, you'd just be given a fresh water. A leaked gameplay screenshot revealed a small gym room, showing the Beta Sun protagonist standing alongside 3 trainers. It raises the question of how closely this system would have mirrored traditional gyms, where you typically battle multiple trainers before facing the leader. Notice that the room itself is relatively plain too, not the grand designs we typically associate with Pokemon gyms. Of course, fully modeling intricate gyms requires a lot more time for what was meant to be a fun post-game addition, so the simplified design could have been one of the reasons the entire feature was ultimately scrapped. There were quite a few minigames that were scrapped from Sun and Moon as well, like Pokemon Dance, a minigame that would have allowed players to compete in dance competitions against other trainers and even players online. You'd control both your main character and your Pokemon, trying to stay in sync with the music. The music was reportedly similar to Dance Dance Revolution. As you won more competitions, your rank would increase, and you would eventually become a regional idol. In Pokemon Stage, Pokemon would take a backseat, and the focus would be entirely on the MC. This mode allowed you to customize your character's performances on stage for a live audience. Your character even had a HP bar that reflected audience ratings. You could also invite your Pokemon on stage if you wanted. While this concept may not have progressed far, it's interesting that it was considered. In Pokemon comics, the mode would have acted as a visual journal for your adventure. Each time you completed in-game events, whether story-related or random, your progress would be recorded in a comic-style format. While the feature doesn't seem especially useful, it did allow you to post these panels on your trainer card, which I can see adding a fun personal touch to your trainer card featuring your customized MC. Pokemon Dollhouse allowed you to place up to 6 Pokemon toys into customizable dollhouses and take pictures. It's unclear if the Pokemon toys would have been animated, but the feature was intended to encourage fans of a Pokemon Treasure figure line to engage with the main series. There would have been figure battles, team building mechanics, and a collection system with varying figure ranks and rarities. Pokemon Hero Time transformed your MC into a superhero, letting you tackle unique events in a hero-themed storyline. You could only bring 1 Pokemon in your party at a time, and while battles would play out normally, your Pokemon would have a special finishing move. Each quest was designed like an episode of a Pokemon anime, complete with its own opening and ending theme. These quests took place in an alternate world, where Pokemon rules were different, though it's unclear exactly how that would have worked. The opening and ending themes seem like a bit too much, but an optional hero mode does sound like it would have been a fun little addition. Survival Island was an ambitious minigame that took place on a giant island facility, where robotic Pokemon roamed freely. You could team up with up to 3 friends or play solo, and the goal was to defeat as many robotic Pokemon as possible within a time limit. You could only bring 3 Pokemon into this mode, and control them directly, similar to the Synchro machine from Scarlet and Violet's DLC. All 4 moves were usable, and since there are no Pokemon centers on the island, you'd have to rely on berries to heal. This idea does sound too advanced for the 3DS, but I could honestly see Game Freak introducing a mode like this in a modern Pokemon game. It does remind me of the other scrapped game from the teraleak, so hopefully we see an official version of it someday. Legend Gate was a mode that allowed players to access parallel worlds, either solo or with friends, to catch rare and legendary Pokemon. This idea does seem like an advanced version of the Ultra Wormholes from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, but it's still pretty cool that we got to see some form of this concept realized in the Ultra games. Game Freak also had plans for a fully customizable bottom screen in Sun and Moon, specifically to celebrate Pokemon's 20th anniversary. Players would have been able to add their favorite Pokemon as icons, based on what they had seen or caught in their Pokedex. You could also change the layout and swap icons for sprites of gym leaders, items, badges, and more. Features like a step counter and clock, reminiscent of a Poketch from Generation 4, would have been included too. Additionally, wallpapers and icons from past games, organized by generation-themed sets, would have offered a range of nostalgic options. For example, mockups showed Generation 5 inspired elements mixed with Generation 3, or you could create a retro design if you wanted. There were many smaller scrapped features as well, which I'm displaying on screen right now. These ranged from evolved versions of returning mechanics to entirely new customization options. Some useful additions included egg cancelling, which would allow you to change a Pokemon's IV and characteristics, and also the ability to change the Pokeball of your Pokemon. Early in Sun and Moon's development, there was also a concept for a smartphone app called Pokemon Breeder. This app would have allowed players to raise Pokemon from eggs and interact with them once hatched. You could also send Pokemon from your Sun and Moon game to the app and engage with them on your phone. It does sound like a spiritual successor to the Pokewalker, and honestly, it's surprising that the Pokemon Company hasn't developed an advanced Pokewalker-like app. Here's hoping they create something like this one day. Another scrapped concept from Sun and Moon was a PokeJobs feature, where your MC could take on different roles in Alola. Potential roles included Pokemon Breeder, Pokemon Ranger, Pokemon Coach, Pokemon Baker, Pokemon Researcher, and Pokeporter. Your player would have their own level that scaled with game progression too. Now this is something I would love to see in a future Pokemon game. I feel like it could add so much depth to Pokemon games, and give players a unique way to explore the world in the post-game. If Game Freak ever revisits this idea, it could add a whole new layer to the gameplay. One of the more interesting scrapped quest lines was inspired by Dragon Ball, titled "The 7 Curveballs Scattered in Alola." In this event, a traveler from another region would meet your MC and reveal that they had lost 7 rare Pokeballs scattered throughout Alola. You would have to explore the region, interacting with NPCs and finding each ball. Each ball also came with a note written by Kurt from Johto, providing insight into its unique properties. Once all 7 were collected, the traveler would give them to you. This questline does sound similar to the Zygarde quest, so while it would have been fun, it's understandable why it didn't make the final cut. Another scrapped feature was PokePlanet, and it was planned to work alongside Festival Plaza. It would have served as a central hub for various activities like Pokemon Ami Plus, and a scrapped dress-up mode. Pokemon would visit your planet via the 3DS Street Pass function and interact in various ways. The feature would have allowed players to cultivate berries, place decorations, and watch Pokemon interact with their planet. You could even change the planet type for further customization. This concept does feel similar to secret bases from previous games, which is one of my favorite features in the Pokemon series, and seeing random Pokemon appear in your world through Street Pass does sound like it would have been a pretty fun experience. Judging by the concept art and in-game screenshots, it seems like PokePlanet was pretty far along in development before it was scrapped, possibly evolving into the Poke Pelago feature we saw in the final game. A version of the Battle Frontier was originally intended to return too, and it would have been called the Battle Cruiser. This massive ship would have allowed players to battle strong trainers and champions from different regions. The Battle Cruiser featured a battle deck and a puzzle facility centered around shogi, the traditional Japanese board game. Winning battles would raise your battle status, making your MC more popular and leading to special trainers from other regions to challenge you at their ports. Yes, this means your trainer would have traveled to ports from other regions, like Castelia City and Vermilion City, with a total of 23 ports available. This could imply that we would have explored Pokemon World ports beyond the regions seen in the first 6 generations. Trainers aboard the ship were referred to as cruise trainers, and through interactions and battles, you could strengthen your bond with them. These bonds would then allow you to trade for rare Pokemon. The Battle Cruiser would have housed multiple facilities, catering to all player levels. There were simple beginner level battles, as well as more intense deck battles that would have required consecutive victories, and a trainer center would have helped players improve through puzzles, quizzes, and shogi matches. Additionally, a rental battle feature would have allowed players without their own Pokemon to borrow a team. The ship also boasted an event hall, a meeting space for cruise trainers and special guests, and a central hub for standard Pokemon training facilities like a daycare. Honestly, you could remove every scrapped feature I've mentioned so far, including the actual Sun and Moon postgame, then just add the Battle Cruiser, and Sun and Moon would feel like the greatest Pokemon game ever. The idea of traveling to different regional ports as part of a postgame would have elevated these games to a whole new level, and it would be hard for even the newer games to top it. I love how content-packed the Battle Cruiser was too, and the ambition behind the concept is clear from the detailed scale of the concept art. Also, fun fact, one of the areas labeled in the screenshots is the Seafoam Islands in Japanese, so it's possible that we could have explored other areas of these regions beyond just the ports. And if you thought the Battle Cruiser was ambitious, wait till you hear about the scrapped DLC planned for Sun and Moon. The DLC was intended to celebrate Pokemon's 20th anniversary, featuring around 200 extra side quests with their own markers, descriptions, and a dedicated UI. While Pokemon games have included DLC in later generations, I can't help but wish we saw what could have been Sun and Moon's DLC. One of the biggest events that was planned for the base game was the Rainbow Rocket storyline, which we eventually saw in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. However, the original draft was significantly different. For starters, it tied into the player's role in building the Alolan Pokemon League by recruiting gym leaders. In this version, Rainbow Rocket would have invaded Alola, with its bosses launching attacks on the gyms you set up throughout the region. There was also supposed to be much more lore and interaction with key characters. The Kahunas would have actively joined the fight against Rainbow Rocket, giving the story a more unified regional defense feel. You would have had more personal moments with the MC's mother, and Red and Blue would have played a much larger role by joining the battle as well. The climax would have revealed a major twist. The Rainbow Giovanni was actually a rocket grunt who greatly admired the real Giovanni and was simply masquerading as him. The real Giovanni would have appeared at the end, and Red and Blue would have confronted him directly, asking about his true goal. Giovanni's answer? He simply wanted to become a trainer his son could be proud of. The story would have concluded with Lily and Luzamine heading to Kanto, while Gladion took over the Aether Foundation. Honestly, this version of the Rainbow Rocket event sounds far more epic and emotional than what we ultimately got. It's a shame it was scrapped, but it's fascinating to think about what could have been. Several Pokemon designs were scrapped during development of Sun and Moon, many of which we have descriptions for. One of the most intriguing was a basilisk-like Pokemon. This grass-type lizard was said to be large enough to carry people on its back, but it was ultimately cut because it apparently resembled Salazzle too closely. Although we don't know exactly how similar it was, some speculate it could have been an identical grass-type counterpart to Salazzle. There was also a planned pre-evolution for Bruxish, as well as other unused designs such as a potato root vegetable Pokemon, an alternate Cosmog form, a butterfly Pokemon, a rooster evolution line, a sea slug Pokemon, and pre-evolutions for Turtonator. Another scrapped idea involved fossil forms, which were intended to be introduced alongside the Alolan forms. These were regional variants with fossil-like adaptations, similar to how Alolan forms changed existing Pokemon. Two notable examples include a Salamence line that never learned how to fly, and a Wailord line that lived on land. There's also this alternate Salamence design, which we don't really know much about, but maybe it was another fossil Salamence design without the extra lore. It's also worth mentioning the rumored scrapped following Pokemon feature. For those unfamiliar, the games had walking and running animations for every single Pokemon in the national dex. These animations are still present in the final game files, but were never actually used. Many fans speculated this was either a scrapped feature or something planned for DLC or even the Ultra games. The fact that Game Freak took the time to animate walking and running for every Pokemon suggests that following Pokemon was definitely part of the plan at some point. However, as we saw in future generations, implementing following Pokemon in a 3D environment still needed time to bake, and it especially needed more time on the 3DS. And with that, we've pretty much covered all of the scrapped content from Pokemon Sun and Moon, and as you can tell, there was a lot of content planned. Given that the development cycle was roughly 2 to 3 years, it makes you wonder what Game Freak could have accomplished with more time. A lot of these ideas are incredibly ambitious, and despite being a relatively small team, This proves that they have big ideas, but just work within strict deadlines. Of course, outsourcing development to other companies or just simply hiring additional developers could help Game Freak take on even more ambitious projects in the future. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Much of this information was overshadowed by the rest of the teraleak, yet it's just as fascinating. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.